What is going on, everyone? Today I'm going to be going over mobility of the hips. I'm going to talk about a couple drills and what I go through. It's part of my usual warm-up for leg day. You've probably seen some of these exercises in the warm-ups for the squat and the deadlift. Like I said last week, the hips highly influence the knees because they are attached to some primary movers, specifically the quads, the VMO, and the hamstrings. So with that, I'm going to go into it. I'm going to tell you a drill that I go through, that I practice with, and it's been inspired by Aaron Horshig. I can't pronounce his name. He's I believe he's a PT up in Canada, and he is actually I believe founder of Squat University. So if you were not following him on YouTube, Instagram, and whatever else other platform he's on, definitely go give him a follow. Highly intelligent guy, knows what he's doing, knows his stuff, and definitely there for you, your longevity, and I love his passion and what he's focused on. So yeah, with that, one of the first things that I do to prime the hips every single time is hip rotations, or otherwise known as trunk rotations. The Army calls them the bent leg body twist, whatever you want to name it. It's all the same thing, and it specifically targets the low back into the hips. So with that, I will show you what that looks like from the front. It is, again, getting on your back, 90-degree angle at the hips, 90-degree angle at the knees. You're bracing yourself with your hands flat on the sides, dropping the knees together to one side, bringing them back up, and then over to the other, and then bringing them back up. Oh my gosh, this feels amazing. You do that. That was one rep right there. Do that for 5 to 10 reps. I am currently at 10 reps during my warm-ups, and that's part of my generic warm-up. It's an everyday warm-up piece, just because I like to keep the whole body flowing and get a full dynamic, full body warm-up. The next is called the 90-90, and you have seen this one as well during my warm-up for the deadlift and warm-up for the squat. And so you have your feet outside of shoulder width, and you are going to drop both knees. So you do an internal and external rotation at the same time. Outward, come back, and outward to the other side and back. So it's an internal, external rotation for both hips. So one is doing internal while the other is doing external. So if I'm going this way, internal, the other, this one over here, the left one, my left, your right, is going external rotation. Yes. And so I will do that for 5 to 10 reps as well. The next one is a strict external rotation. So I know we're just doing external rotation, but now we're gonna prime our hips by focusing on some very specific muscle groups. And so what I do is I will drop at the end of that 90-90, and now I'm putting all the pressure on this knee and this hip. And if you don't have if you have a little bit of tightness, you could probably put like a yoga pad or a yoga block underneath your hips, so it gives you a little bit of height, and then that reduces that tension or the stiffness. But what we're going to do is we're going to focus on that back leg, getting some external rotation in the leg that is on the inside. One thing I want you to know is I want the hip that you're lying on to be out straight in front of you, and then 90-degree at the knee, and then the other hip or the other leg is in line with that hip that's being activated with a 90-degree angle. And what you're going to do is you're going to look back, focus on raising that leg up, hold for 1, come back down, and then up, hold for 1, come back down. And that is the external rotation. Make sure you do both legs. I am at 5 before I start like really getting tired and too hot, to be honest. Um, it's an absolute weak point of mine that I need to address, or that I've been addressing for the last 2 months and a half, and that's mostly because it started a deficit or a cut, and have been seeing significant issues during my squat and deadlift. So always adjusting, always playing around, kind of working with the technique, working with the movements, and yeah, working through any issues that arise. So the next part is when you'll start needing a band. This is my personal band. It's made by Spree, I believe. Not super tight. I think it's a 15 to 20 pound band. And what we're going to do is go through a hip joint opening, or that's what I call it. I'm sure that there's a specific name for it. But essentially, you'll be grabbing. Why don't I just take you through it? So what you're going to do is you grab your band, get it hooked onto. I have it on my squat rack here, but you can get it to a post, or maybe a doorknob if you have an attachment that you can stick through the door. Anything that's stable enough that'll hold it in place. Now this squat rack would be too light if it didn't have any of this weight on it, but since it's got weight on it, it's good enough. So just make sure that your object that you're using is not moving on you. And so the first thing that you want to do is put your leg through the loop, get it up in there as high as you want it to be, or as high as you can get it to be. And then you're going to get a nice solid lateral step away from the band to create some tension. So right now I've got a little bit of tension in there, but I want a little bit more, right? So I'm going to go out, and then there it is. Now my knee's falling in, and that's what I want. I want a slight knee drop. If you feel a little bit of a pinch, go ahead and throw a little bit more tension on there. So what that means is you'll have to take another step away. But for me right now, I'm feeling what I'm supposed to be, which is you're supposed to be feeling a slight, very minute hip or joint opening. It'll almost feel like a release in that area. It'll feel like a deep stretch inside of the hip. Now, if you think of the hip, it's it's like a capsule or a ball and socket, and so it's kind of got that joint in there, right, nice and tight. And what we're doing here is slightly opening it up to create a little bit of space inside there. Not a lot, just releasing tension essentially. And so what we're doing is we got our knee drop, and what we're going to do is we're going to push in and then release. Push in, and then release, push in, and then release, and push in, and release. I do this about 5 times before I go into the next step, which is putting my hand down, still getting that knee drop, and now I'm pushing in again, doing the same thing, going through that same motion. That's it. Now going into the next phase of this whole circuit, I should say, or a little bit of a workout is we're doing the same thing, but now we're focusing on that back hip, the one on the other side, and we're getting a deep stretch in there, and then pushing in and releasing, pushing in and releasing, pushing in, releasing, and pushing in, and releasing. Now the last piece is a pigeon pose. And so what we're going to do is we're going to drop the knee down. And now we're just looking for any stiffness, any muscle tension, or any tightness. And we're just dropping our hips into that space right behind our ankle that's on the ground, directly behind the knee. And then coming back up, adjusting fire or adjusting our leg, looking for more stiffness. So what we're going for is just getting that full stretch out there. A great way to do this, a great way to make sure that you're doing it properly is tightening the glutes. So going back to that first position, tighten your glutes, squeeze your glutes, and make sure that you got it all squeezed. Let that knee drop and then push in. And then release. Same thing with that hip stretch. Tighten your glutes so that you get a full stretch in there. Push in and release. Push in and release. And then lastly, once again, going back to the pigeon pose, making sure that you have a full squeeze in the glutes, driving those glutes into the ground. Or driving those hips into the ground, I'm sorry. Yeah, and so make sure that you do both sides. Obviously you want a lot of you want balance, right? And yeah, that's about it. If you're having a side that's like really giving you issues, definitely you want to focus on that. Make sure that you're taking care of that hip. I'm actually glad that I'm doing this because as of late, like I said, my squat, oh my goodness, I've been struggling with the left side, of course, the side that I'm not doing right now. So I think I'm going to take the next couple minutes to do that. But that is it for our Mobility Monday for hips. Thank you for watching. Like and subscribe if you enjoyed the video. And I will see you on Wednesday for Warm-Up Wednesday, which I'll be doing bench and incline, so it's mostly chest. And you'd actually be surprised on what you actually warm up during that or for those movements. On the next one, or until the next one, have a good one.